Good evening and welcome to Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, well, we continue our election 2014 coverage in a big way with the candidate, the person, the woman that all the polls show is the front runner and the odds-on favorite to become the next governor of Massachusetts. We'll talk with Attorney General Martha Coakley about her campaign and the upcoming Democratic convention in 2 weeks. Then on the second half, old friend, Boston Globe op-ed columnist Tom Keene joins us, and we'll look at the field in this race and some of the other races on the ballot this fall. All that and more tonight on Talk of the Neighborhood. All right, we're back with Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host tonight. All politics, as is our usual want, and in a big way as we continue our coverage of election 2014. Of course, many races on the ballot this fall, none bigger than the race for governor so far, and 5 Democratic candidates in the race, 2 Republicans, 2 independents. It's a busy time for all the candidates. Coming up in less than 2 weeks, the state Democratic convention. Of course, candidates need to get 15% of the delegates' vote to get on the primary ballot, so it is important. Tonight, one of those who in all likelihood will make that threshold, but as she looks forward to the fall, many see her as the candidate to beat. We're talking, of course, Attorney General Martha Coakley is here tonight. And thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure, Joe. It's nice to see you again.
Yes, yeah. Yes. Well, it wasn't quite this set, but lots of things have changed since then. Let's start off with this. Are you comfortable with that label, front runner, or does that make you a little uncomfortable? Feel like you have a little bit of a target on your back?
Well, you know, we can't change the numbers in that respect, but we don't really pay much attention to them. You know, I've been through races I've won and races I've lost, of course, and you know that poll is the snapshot of what it looks like today. But one of the things I'm really focused on is making sure that I'm out everywhere talking to folks, hearing what they want in the next governor, seeing the great things that are going on in Massachusetts and how we can turn this economy around. So I'm going to work every day. I know that I've got to earn everybody's vote. I'm knocking on doors. I'm shaking a lot of hands. Things that I learned, by the way, in my first race in Boston.
Yeah, that's so many years ago.
Exactly.
Of course, and talking about that, and I do want to talk about that more, but I want to talk first about, of course, the convention coming up. You're comfortable that you are going to meet that 15% threshold, of course. Could you win the Democratic endorsement?
I think there's 2 reasons for the convention. One is to get activists and Democrats together to agree on a platform, to hear from all the candidates and get people excited about the primary and, of course, the general. The second is really just to have a threshold to see if people can get that 15% or not. We worked hard on our caucuses. We're pretty comfortable we'll be 15 plus. That's really all we're concerned about. And as soon as the convention's over, we're going to be focused on the primary.
So the endorsement and winning the endorsement, not so important to you?
It's just not what we're focused on right now. I think that we have our supporters at the convention. There are a lot of delegates. We have a lot of choices. You know, and I'll say this, Joe, we got great people in this race. A lot of good candidates for governor and other races. This is about having a chance to meet with activists and tell them your story. And, you know, we have our supporters, so we're really comfortable we'll come out of the convention well poised for the primary.
What made you decide to jump in? You were comfortable. You're doing a great job as Attorney General. I think everybody feels that way. Why this? Why now?
Well, you know, I've loved being Attorney General. We've done some great work in that office, keeping people in their homes, going after Wall Street, you know, making sure that we didn't have unnecessary foreclosures. We challenged the Defense of Marriage Act. We had an anti-trafficking bill. And, you know, last March or so, people said, would you think about running? And I said, you know, I like what I'm doing. But over the summer, my husband and I talked. And what I am excited about, and one of the reasons I've decided to get in the race is I've had the chance to see as Attorney General what great things have happened in the state despite a bad economy. The governor has moved us ahead on education issues and on a clean economy. I see this as a crucial time for the next governor to be able to make sure that we turn the economy around for everybody, and not just, frankly, not just Boston. It's got to be where I grew up in North Adams and all over the state, but we can do this. And if we invest in our kids and good education and workforce, we're going to be able to build an economy on our terms this time, not the one that last time around Wall Street gambled and lost. We're still digging out from that. But we've got smart people here, good businesses here. We've got the opportunity to build all over this Commonwealth businesses that will stay here, that will give people, everybody, that opportunity to get a good education, get a good job. And I believe I can do that really well. I've seen as Attorney General, as the lawyer for the governor and the Commonwealth, and for the people of the Commonwealth. And with the new AG, there won't be any break-in for me. I'll know what the AG can do. I'll know what governor can do. We can keep marching forward for a Massachusetts that's prosperous and fair to everybody.
Of course, Governor Patrick got a start on some of that, but there's also been a lot of problems, with various departments. Has he done a good job, in your opinion?
Well, I think there are certainly ways in which, in areas where we could do a better job. I mean, I know from my time as district attorney, working then with our DSS workers and now DCF workers, and I've said this in this campaign, we need to reorganize that agency so that we focus on keeping kids safe and not just keeping families together, sometimes at the expense of keeping kids safe. But I've worked closely with those teams, and I know that we need better training and resources for folks. But I still believe that if we do that and change some of that, we invest in intervening early. Let's get at some of these problems in our schools with our kids and families before they become crises. Let's bring in better technology so that we can keep track of our caseloads. But most importantly, we need to keep kids safe, and we need systems that will keep kids safe. I've done that for a long time. I know what we need to do here in Massachusetts.
As you run, and of course, you've been Attorney General now for
almost 8 years.
Is it sometimes difficult to kind of make that shift? Not that anybody that knows anything about the AG's office knows it's much more than law and order. It's a lot of civil litigation there,
Yes.
Primarily civil litigation. But is it sometimes difficult to kind of shift between Martha Coakley, law and order, and Martha Coakley
As governor? Well, let me tell you how I think about that, because when I first went to be an assistant district attorney, when I lived in Boston, I lived in Dorchester on Pope's Hill, I watched a lot of Perry Mason as a kid, and I read Nancy Drew, and I wanted to try cases, and I loved doing that. But as I took over our child abuse unit, for instance, I started to see it was more about just this case or that case, but it was, gee, how do we keep kids safe? How do we keep our teachers and our other mandated reporters aware of the law? How do we be fair to kids? How do we talk to kids? And so I started then even looking at more problem solving than I did just cases. How do we prevent domestic violence? How do we work better with our kids after Columbine in our schools? And when I became Attorney General, although we do a lot of litigation, we also look much more broadly at ways in which we can solve problems for the Commonwealth and for people of the Commonwealth. We were able to, by bringing a lawsuit but then resolving it, bring back hundreds of millions of dollars to Massachusetts. And we still work one-on-one with families if they've got trouble in modifying a loan, to keep them in their homes. So I like the idea that with my experience as a DA and as an Attorney General, as governor, I won't miss a beat on what those offices do and how we can do better around keeping our kids safe, making sure we provide services for people who need help with families, who need help with mental health, behavioral health. I've seen what happens when we don't do that, was we end up with people who are homeless, end up in a criminal justice system. But I believe that people here are ready to invest in our kids, in our workforce, and we'll have a knowledge economy here that will let us build the kinds of economies that we own on our own terms, not what Wall Street wants.
And that's the plus side. It gives you that knowledge. Is there a downside to that too? I'm thinking of course, you're the Commonwealth's attorney.
Yes.
And you're asked to rule on, various matters and represent the Commonwealth in various cases. Sometimes they're not so comfortable positions. I'm thinking, though, the ballot issue for gambling, which is being, you ruled wasn't appropriate for the ballot, and it's being appealed. And not to focus on that solely, but does that sometimes put you in a difficult spot too?
It's a different hat. We all do jobs where our focus is one thing, but I think I've been able to shift my focus, and I would on questions like that that's peculiar to the Attorney General to determine should this go on the ballot or not. It will give me as governor a better idea about when we bring the Attorney General in, how we work with them on that kind of problem solving. And I certainly wouldn't interfere with what the Attorney General does, but I think we could work closely together to avoid some problems sooner before we get litigation or before we have some of the issues, as we did with the poor young boy Jeremiah Oliver. Let's work closely to prevent those things and provide more help to people before their problems.
Well, of course, the gambling issue just doesn't seem to go away, and it's still there. And I'm sure that's just one of many issues that you're asked about constantly as you go forward, and you're on the campaign trail every day. Let's talk a little bit about the campaign trail. What do you see this race ultimately kind of turning on, the Democratic primary, first of all, and then the general election?
So in the primary, as I said, we've got 5 great candidates. I think we've had a lot of debates together. We've had forum together. I think we've all brought something to that race, and I think we've learned from each other. I think we've all probably seen on the trail that what people are interested in is how are we going to keep our jobs and worry about our parents who are retiring, how are we going to pay for college, how are we going to keep moving ahead when the economy's been tough for folks. Not everybody's recovered really well. People are worried about education. They want to make sure their kids are going to have a chance to to go to college and, as I said, to pay for it. And I think I have learned from meeting with folks that they're cautiously optimistic. They see a good future ahead, but they want to make sure that they're going to be able to take part in that. And I see the role of governor, as I've talked to people about these things, is being a good partner to our Mayor Walsh, to our city councilors in Boston, to work with them on the problems they see at the ground level, but where the state may be able to help better with Chapter 70 funding for schools, taking a look at providing the kinds of things we want for all of our kids in our schools, including STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math, but how about bringing back some arts and recess? I think our kids are in a system where a lot of teachers, and I've heard this from teachers and parents, and kids, there's too much kind of teaching to the test, and let's get back on track to get kids excited about learning again. That's where our future is going to be.
Governor Patrick and the legislature in the past has really pushed forward with education reform, but there's now some serious pushback on it. And in fact, the person who was just elected to the head of the MTA is a fierce opponent of standardized testing. The state's just getting ready to roll out its new test, the PARC test. Is that the direction we should be going?
Yeah, I actually think that originally we needed ed reform 20 years ago when we instituted the test, but the test should have been to see where are our kids. It should have been a floor, not a ceiling, and it should have been a diagnostic test. I just feel that, and I've heard this from teachers and parents and kids, that it's become too much the focus. It's too bureaucratic. The teachers we're going to lose good teachers who don't want to stay. Kids aren't excited about going to school. And if we really want to invest in them to be excited about learning, we need to get away from, not all testing obviously, but we need to get away from the idea that being successful as a school or as an individual student is just how well you do on those tests.
So you might rethink that somewhat.
I am rethinking it, absolutely.
And of course, now the campaign has been so far fairly civil, or so to speak. But of course, as we get closer and closer, do you expect anything to come out of the convention? There's also, what about the role of money in this race? Do you find that the whole Citizens United case, that are you worried that there's going to be all of this this money coming in, flowing into this race that could, well, who knows? None of those ads seem to be very positive. But,
well,
maybe you'll get some promoting you, but maybe you won't. Are you worried about that?
I'm worried about the impact that Citizens United has on all of our races,
Right.
not just mine, but our national races, our local races. The ability of basically, rich corporations or groups of people to come in without identifying who they are to run negative ads against a particular candidate. That doesn't seem to me to be the American way, the way we want voters to pick their candidates. So we've moved to, we'd have to do a constitutional amendment to change that. In the short run, though, because there are two people in this race already who have set up or super PACs have set up for them. At the minimum, Massachusetts should insist, and voters should insist, that there be disclosure of where those funds come from.
Right.
And we could do that. And I know there's a statute pending that would do that here in Massachusetts, and that would be a start. But I think voters really care about, you asked me earlier, I think they care about jobs and economy, but they also care about who's got good ideas, who's organizing, who's working hard as a candidate, and who will work hard as governor. And I think that voters want to be able to pick that person based upon advertising, interviews like this, who they meet, out campaigning, but they don't want to be influenced by some big corporation that they don't even know about who's running negative ads that may or may not be accurate.
Well, the thought is that some of that could come back against candidates, or certainly those that's supporting it here. But it was interesting in the mayor's race. There was money coming in, but it was from the other end of the spectrum. It was from a lot of it labor unions. So will you be accepting support from groups like that if they choose to? Of course, I know you can't acknowledge that officially, but...
Look, I'm honored to have the support of a lot of major unions in Massachusetts. I've always worked closely with them and support their principles, and that has to do with making sure people get a fair day's pay for hard work. I also have said I will disavow super PACs in this race, and I think other candidates should do that. We've talked about trying to have a people's pledge like Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown, and that would keep that money out. You can't do it unilaterally, but I do think at a minimum we should in Massachusetts be insisting that if those super PACs do ads in Massachusetts, the disclosure of who gave the money should be there.
No anonymous donors. Again, if you haven't been paying attention, there is one hell of a race this fall on the ballot. That's of course, the governor's race. Multiple candidates in the Democratic Party. There's 5 candidates running. In a little less than 2 weeks, they'll all be at the state Democratic Convention looking for an endorsement or at least 15% to get on the primary ballot. Joining me tonight, one of those candidates and the person that many feel is the odds-on favorite to become the next governor of Massachusetts. Now, of course, you've been in this position before, and when you were running for the U.S. Senate, boy, everybody said cakewalk. Martha Coakley.
That's why I don't pay attention to those polls anymore. It's why we're building the grassroots campaign we are. And remember, that was a special election. We've taken time in this general election to really get out and meet people all around the state. Right. And I think that's a big difference. And I've learned lessons from that race. That was a tough loss for all Democrats. And for me, nobody wanted to see that happen, and we made some mistakes. I said if I was going to run again, I would correct those. Remember, I got right back out and ran again for Attorney General. I ran statewide. I'm proud of the work we've done. But I also know, and it's why we're running the campaign we are, I have to earn everybody's vote. There's no entitlement here. There's no expectation that everybody has to work for this, including especially me.
Any other lessons you took out of that race? Of course, it was unusual coming after the death of Senator Kennedy, but things happen in campaigns, and it's some of it can't be anticipated. Do you feel that as you're prepared this time, though, to kind of come what may, whatever it is that comes at you, you're ready?
Absolutely, and I think after that, I am ready. Nothing could be tougher than that in some respects. But, the reason I do this work, Joe, is I care about the work. I care about, as Attorney General, representing people, as governors, being a voice for people who often don't have a voice. Corporations, always going to be able to place those ads or get someone to represent them. But, a lot of people don't, and it's folks who are about to lose their home, or folks who are worried about a child who has a mental illness problem, people who get overcharged on their insurance and have nowhere to go. But as governor, you get to say, I speak for everybody in Massachusetts, not special interests, not folks who have done ads that you're not sure where the money came from, but people that I care about and I know deserve a fair shot at getting a good education and a good job. I had that advantage as a kid. I know it made a big difference to me. And I've been able to, in public service, be an advocate for not just public safety as a DA, but for fairness and for opportunities for people in civil work. And I really believe as governor, I will be able to be that voice.
Well, talking about a fair shake, of course, there's an interesting trial going on right now in federal court with John O'Brien from the probation department. Is that a sign? It'll be very interesting because to determine whether it's patronage, as some have suggested, or if there's something more there. But is that a sign, in your opinion, that there is something wrong with our system in Mass and the way the funding is doled out, the way that the power that certain lawmakers have? I'm thinking back when Governor Weld was first elected, and I'm dating myself here, but
I remember that too, Joe.
Yes, when he said he was going to come in and clean house,
reform.
Yes. What's your take on that?
Well, I think, first of all, there have been huge changes made since that original study was done and that investigation around it. The system has changed, the heading of probation has changed. I think in general, and for probation particularly, that process is much more transparent than it was at the time. And whatever the jury decides, that is up to the jury. But that report and some of the investigations that came out of it, I think, did have the impact on, in fact, reforming that piece, which is very important to the criminal justice system.
Just by shining a light on it, you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shining a light on things makes a big difference. When people understand what's going on, people are aware that people are going to be accountable for what they do. It's incredibly important that we do that. And that's whether we're talking about contractors in the big dig or the way probation works, the way government works. We have to be transparent about what we're doing. And so I think there have been some changes for the good. Probation, by the way, is a very important piece of the criminal justice system. And we should have people who are well qualified to do those jobs. That's not what is at issue in this trial necessarily, but and I don't, it's not my case, and I have the information you do, so I'll be curious to see what a jury does.
Were you ever tempted, though, to get into that whole area, just in terms of, and I know, and again, a lot of people don't understand the role of the AG, but certainly whether it's even shining a light on it or some kind of prosecutorial or litigation related to it. Were you ever tempted?
Well, I will say this, that we had brought a case against the probation director, against John O'Brien. He was acquitted on that at the state level, and it was a more limited instance that we brought it. Some of that had come out of the original Ware report.
Right.
At that time, however, we knew that the federal government was investigating it, so we wouldn't have duplicated that effort. We usually know that the FBI or the federal government is investigating something at the state level. We don't duplicate the effort.
Right, but just in general, and not to focus on that, I think some people are saying, well, there's something not rotten in Denmark. There's rotten in Massachusetts politics, and I guess that's my question. Is there something inherently kind of unfair in the way our system is set up?
Well, we've tried our best. I started a new public integrity division when I came in. We brought, almost 100 investigations around campaign finance, around political corruption. And I think between what we've been able to do and some of the new reporting laws and the way we do shine a light on what we do, not just for people running for office, but for people once they're in office, I think we've seen a change. And I think I'm hopeful we'll see a change. I think we can't go back. The public expects to have people who do their best every day to represent the public. I believe that, and I think this trial, whatever turns out, there have been some changes that have been made in a system. People should have confidence that their government is being fair.
Well, and if Martha Coakley has anything to do about it, as your next governor, perhaps. We were talking, we've got just a minute or two left before the show. Of course, the first time we met many years ago, well, a few years ago, is when
1997 to be exact.
When you ran for a state rep.
Yes.
And in Dorchester, you were living in Dorchester at the time, and that was shortly after we started this show. And I recall you coming in, and it was a great field. And as it turned out, Marty Walsh won that seat. You did not, but I recall at the time saying to my producer, that woman is a great candidate, and you were so well spoken. You still are, and you still got the political bug, and it's nice to see that, you know, I'm not the only one, but you know, and in a much different vein. But you know, nice to see you, and thanks. When you win, will you come back and join us for another show?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I'd be delighted to, Joe.
all.
Thanks for having me tonight.
I appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Best of luck to you
Thank
at
you.
the convention and going forward again.